Hello and welcome to Help on Arrow FM 92.7. I am your host, Abby, and we have
Michael here as well.
Yeah, and Help, for those of you who haven't tuned in before, is us talking about parenting life and as we try to navigate our way through having a family and parenting, trying to bring out the topics that we wish we knew about.
Yeah, or little things or information that would have been helpful right back from the start. And then also exploring what could be as our kids get into teenagers or...
That's true. Preparing ourselves for the teenage life.
Trying to.
So last week we were talking about spending time with our children and really touching in on that quality time with the kids, not quantity. And I think we were talking about it before, the thing that resonated with me the most from that conversation that I was mindful of all week was when I'm spending time with the kids, that it's not that I'm tired and stressed with them, that I'm actually relaxed and present and calm and focused on them and enjoying myself as well. Although I feel like this afternoon I was definitely tired and stressed, or just tired.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of part of that study was highlighting the fact that because it is quality of time that's important, not the quantity, and it was specific about when you are in those spaces that you are feeling negative or frustrated, it actually has a larger detrimentation to the kids. It's actually better to remove yourself from the kids then try to push through. And I think that was quite a big challenge because you want to just, I just need to be with the kids, but actually if you structure in that quality time through the week, you'll have a much better relationship.
That's right. Alrighty, well, how about we kick off this show today with a song, and then when we get back from the song, we will have a look at what we're doing today. I think Michael and I are a little bit off the cuff with today's show, but we do have a little bit of a plan.
Just a little bit, unfortunately. My day has definitely not gone as planned. So,
all right, well, let's have a listen to Have a Good Life by Benedict Cork.
I'm drinking alone now. I'm drinking a habit. I can do what I want now. I'll drink to the freedom. I ain't gonna waste my tears. Ain't gonna pick up the pieces. So tell your friends I don't care. We never say goodbye. Tell your family I won't give you another try. Have a good life, I'll see you never. Pumping my fist, we're not together. Yeah, I never really liked your mama. Goodbye love, cheers to the drama. Have a good life, I will without you. Find a new girl, someone to lie to. Ain't nobody gonna treat you better. Goodbye love, I'll see you never. A taste of the power, you wouldn't be the same. So is it illusion? A sip of tequila, and I wouldn't see you for days. Just when I need you. So tell your friends I don't care. We never said goodbye. And tell yourself I moved on. I'm leaving you behind. I'll see you never. Pumping my fist, we're not together. Yeah, I never really liked your mama. Goodbye love, cheers to the drama. Have a good life, I will without you. Find a new girl, someone to lie to. Ain't nobody gonna treat you better. Goodbye love, I'll see you never. Tell your friends I don't care. We never say goodbye. Tell yourself I moved on. I'm leaving you behind. Have a good life, I'll see you never. Pumping my fist, we're not together. Yeah, I never really liked your mama. Goodbye love, cheers to the drama. Have a good life, I'll see you never. Pumping my fist, we're not together. Yeah, I never really liked your mama. Goodbye love, cheers to the drama. Have a good life, I will without you. Find a new someone to lie to.
that was Have a Good Life by Benedict Cork. Alrighty, so this week we were going to talk about, what were we going to talk about?
Reflecting on our childhood. So it's more about what are things in our life that, or in our childhood, that we identify that may not have been so great that that we're deliberately trying to change for the benefit of our children. So I guess it's, I wrote a little spiel here.
All right then.
Very short.
Let's hear your spiel.
As parents, you often want to create a better environment and opportunities than you have when growing up. So I want to explore this a little, about some of the things that we are wanting to challenge with respect to whether it is a generational thing or whether it is something specific to us. Now, I haven't done a whole lot of research as to see if there has been case studies about this. It was more you and I being able to have a discussion about some of the things that we've done.
Yeah, and of course, I think if you're listening to this and thinking about it, not every family's necessarily had, difficult upbringings or difficult parents, like maybe you might reflect back and think, actually, my parents were awesome. And I don't think I would, I respect their parenting, but it's not even necessarily about their parenting. It's just about what your childhood was like versus what childhood is like now for kids. And I think it's good to look at outside of the home and outside of parenting, because there are other factors. I just think about the kids at school and how I went through school and how I do things differently for the kids because of my experience through school. It's not a negative on any teacher or on schools now. It's just maybe lessons that I'm teaching the kids now that either I can't remember being taught at that age, or maybe I appreciate being taught.
Yeah, and I think that's where, for me, that falls into the whole generational thing, because the way they do schooling now is different. And that's because they've kind of done a lot more research on how kids develop. And so the structure that we got brought up in was very set at focusing on one set of learning abilities, which if you weren't in it, it made you feel like you weren't necessarily smart or intelligent, whereas now there's a lot of changes going on there.
Yeah, that's probably my biggest thing when, as using school as an example, that I would do differently or try to make the experience different for our kids is I felt that school growing up, particularly at secondary school, was very much academic focused, and you have to go to uni and you have to get good grades and you need to get your excellences. I felt the pressure of that. And then when I left school, I thought that I was really dumb because I didn't meet any of those expectations. They were not expectations set by my parents at all. My parents were really, school was important, but for them it was you try your best, you do your best. But it wasn't, they didn't put that pressure on it. It was the pressure I felt from school internally. And yeah, I do see how, I can't really remember primary school that well, but I do see how school at this primary age is a bit different now with just the social aspect, I think is what I'm thinking about. That social side of schooling is just as important, or that creative side of schooling is just as important in sports. Not, like you said, not everyone fits the mold of what school is, but is school flexible to cater to the different people and the different strengths and the different learning styles? I mean, I'm a kinesthetic learner. School sucked.
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn in that environment.
Yeah, and I guess it's worth exploring, because as you've identified, you had an experience of school that wasn't as positive because it was very much focused. That was our generation grew up in. We've recognised that school, the way they do schooling now has changed. We're trying to provide a better schooling for our kids in terms of how we're doing at home. But then are we allowing our experiences to fall onto our kids because we keep forgetting that schooling has actually changed, and actually
That's
just
true.
allow them to go through the process now with certain margins, but we don't actually need to intently focus on that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think for you and I, it's more going to come into play when the kids are at college, because all our kids are at primary school right now. It's not, it's like I don't see those same pressures or stresses within primary at this point. But I found too that the school that our kids are at, it's been great talking to the teachers. The teachers actually want to hear about your children and how they're wired and how they work and how they can meet their needs if it's possible, and how do we work together for the best outcome for the kids. And but then I think that generational thing is a huge factor. Like, I think we've touched on it before, or maybe I have at different points, but my parents, their upbringing was not like the upbringing of kids today. And not saying that kids have it perfect. Of course, there's, still some difficult childhoods out there. But I remember Mum was saying that for her it was very much your not seen and not heard.
That when she was a kid.
When she was a kid, yeah.
Yeah.
Parents all were in the lounge and the kids had to go to the bedrooms.
Which seems to be a fairly common thread through that generation from some people I've talked to. Like, it does vary, but it was very much kids who had their space and had to, and there probably was a lot more control on them.
It would also be interesting, the cultural influences too, because sitting in some of the tikanga Māori courses that I've been to last year through work, and listening to some of the teachers there talking about the importance of tamariki and coming around the children and the respect that is given to them just as much as that's given to their kaumātua. It's also a very different cultural way of family and focus, that children have a significant place in the whānau, which I think is quite different to maybe, I don't know, I'm not going to say all European, but maybe it's particularly the English culture.
Yep. No, culture is a big thing, and I mean, for us, we can only speak from the cultures we've grown up in, which with you doing a lot more research into your Māori ancestry lately, your upbringing has been predominantly Western. Same with mine. And so as much as it's great that we are listening to other cultures and experiencing that and learning more about it, part of our journey is that we're taking from our upbringing of being a Western and looking at other ways of doing things, Māori.
So you can see where that's impacted the generations too, because for a time there, the Western way was the only way, and any other way that was not theirs was, not allowed. And that's a very unfortunate thing that has happened in our history that has really impacted many people and many whānau and families. That is going into a different topic, but so it is interesting to think about childhood and how it's different. And I guess when you do start to come into the four walls of your own family, yes, maybe there are things that you might not necessarily carry on, or things you learn through parenting courses that is just different. And I remember when I went to one of the parenting courses and I was talking to Mum about something, Mum was like, man, that would have been so handy had they had parenting courses when we were having kids. And I was like, yeah, that's true. So maybe that's another thing as well. We have the benefit of a lot more information around child development, family units, trauma, all sorts of different things. We've got information at our fingertips, which has its pros but also has its cons.
Yeah, because sometimes it's trying to find what information is actually suitable, especially if you remember the days when we had the young babies and you are trying to find a whole lot of stuff, and then everyone's got opinion about this and everyone's opinion's conflicting, and you just get lost in what you should or shouldn't do with your child because you don't want to break your child.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to get in trouble. That was my thing. I didn't want to get in trouble. Someone was going to tell me off.
Yes. I remember that first day, we're going to take Lucy down to the shops, and
that's right.
Do we need to ask anyone?
I thought I had to ask my midwife, like, am I allowed to take her out? Is this okay?
Yep.
Alrighty, well, why don't we flick into another song, and when we get back, let's take a look at some of your questions there and have a talk about them. So we are going to listen to You Can't Hurry Love by Mackenzie Thomas.
I need love to ease my mind, and I need to find time, someone to call mine. No, you can't hurry love, no, you just have to wait. She said love don't come easy, but it's a game of give and take. You can't hurry love, no, you just have to wait. Just trust in a good time, no matter how long it takes. Oh, how many heartaches must I stand before I find the love that lets me live again? Right now the only thing that keeps me hanging on, when I feel my strength, ooh, it's almost gone. I remember you can't hurry love, no, you just have to wait. She said love don't come easy, it's a game of give and take. How long must I wait? How much more must I take before loneliness will cause my heart to break? No, I can't better live my life alone. I grow impatient for love to call my own, but when I feel that I can't go on, well, these precious words keep me hanging on. I remember she said you can't hurry love, no, you just have to wait. She said love don't come easy, but it's a game of give and take. You can't hurry love, no, you just have to wait. Just trust in a good time, no matter how long it takes. Now wait, now love don't come easy, but I keep on waiting, anticipating for that soft voice to talk to me at night, for some tender arms to hold me tight. I keep on waiting, I keep on waiting, but it ain't easy, it ain't easy. You can't hurry love, no, you just have to wait. She said love don't come easy, but it's a game of give and take. You can't hurry love, no, you just have to wait. Love don't come easy, it's a game of give and take. You can't hurry love, just have to wait.
And that is You Can't Hurry Love by Mackenzie Thomas. I like that version. Alrighty, so Michael, let's go with your questions that you've got.
Yeah, so some of the questions are relating to a topic of what we've recognised as something. So the first one is, what is something that you recognise you would like to change for your children? Now, a situation I kind of want to bring up, because this is something I've been thinking about or have in the past, is the whole aspect over protecting the kids from situations that may seem adult in terms of finances, financial difficulty, even stress, loss of jobs. So protecting the kids from those negative aspects or exposing them to help them talk through. And just wanting to break down this because it's a big topic. So my upbringing, the way my parents dealt with life or a lot of things was that it was behind a closed door. So often mum and dad would go into the bedroom, door would be shut. Could be like that for quite some time, but we never really got brought into that discussion as to if the family was going through something difficult. And I remember there was times where I can recall that we had some financial difficulty, but I was oblivious to it because I was protected. So first off, where do you stand on that situation?
It's really interesting you say that, because hearing you explain that, I can see how some of that dynamic still plays out even now as adults. between in your family, and I understand that wanting to protect the children, absolutely, because as parents, we want our children to just know that life is wonderful and that there's nothing that's going to harm them, and also there's things that are not really appropriate for children, and there are some things that we need to protect them on. But I think it's figuring out for you and your partner, your husband or whoever, what it is you want to protect your children from and why. And is it going to help them? And is it more that it's more age appropriate? Because there comes a point where if you it's no longer protection, I think it becomes sheltering. And then when you have children who are sheltered and protected, and although it comes from good intention, they're not prepared for the world around them, and then can really struggle in that adult life because they haven't learned or experienced emotions or situations, or they're learning. Like, I think that's the biggest thing I've learned from our kids, is they learn more so from you and I and how we cope with life than being told how to learn.
Yeah. And to a point, because I do agree with you on all that, with the fact that at times you shelter them, but equally as much it's important to talk them through situations, because otherwise they don't learn. So big one for me was I didn't actually learn how to do a budget.
Right.
Finances did not get discussed in my family. So when it came to life changing decisions like buying a house, having to pay all the bills and stuff like that stuff I had to learn as an adult.
Right.
So I guess it's like, to me, that's not like a big thing we've got to protect the kids from, because it's going to ruin their childhood.
Do you think that your parents were protecting you from finances? Like, you say that this is your example for being, an example from protecting their kids. How do you think your parents were protecting you from the financial decisions? Or is it that they had a perspective that you just didn't need to know about it because you're the children?
That's a good question. And I know later on that my parents went through a period where they were running a business that didn't go well. But I don't know all the finer details, but there's one instance I remember where I was going to a private school back then.
Oh, okay, private school.
So it was a Christian school, and it was a little bit more expensive than others. So part of that, I had to shift schools, and they gave me the option of shifting after I was halfway through the year. So I could either shift at the end of the year, which would have been into year 8, or I could shift now halfway through year 7. And I chose to shift at that point, straight away. But find out later on, Dad said every week he went to work, he was basically ended up with more in debt than when he started.
Right.
And that impacted him quite a bit.
Mm.
I found out that he ends up getting depressed through it all.
Yeah.
But none of that we knew.
Right.
So that's when it comes back to the whole finances. I don't know if they were just protecting me, if they were just choosing the kids didn't need to know this. But then the impact of that is I'm not necessarily knowing how to deal with those situations later on in life.
And I guess for them, they just wanted you kids to know that life was okay and reassurance, everything is fine, everything is normal. And so I can see how that is a form of protection, because they just wanted you to know and feel like you were in a safe and secure environment. But then I think what we notice is that kids are very intuitive and kids are very aware, and kids know when there's stuff going on.
Yeah. Like I picked up that stuff was going on. When they asked me that question, I picked up that, it's going to be better for me to shift schools, so I may as well do that.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you all the reasons why, but I knew.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing we need to be aware of, is that kids will actually know that something's going on.
But then there's no addressing any emotions through any of it.
Correct.
Okay, yes, it's such a you thing to do is, okay, if this is the best option, we'll go for it. But then I can see how through that process, from what you're explaining to me now, there was no kind of acknowledging emotions in any of this. Like, how did it make you feel leaving the school? And was that talked about with you, how that made you feel leaving the school? And the uncertainty of what you might have been picking up on the home, how was that making you feel? Were these things talked about? Because that's when children learn emotions. That's when children learn,
Yeah. Well, that experience was a lot more practical, like
right.
doing this because it makes sense.
Yeah.
I think I remember saying, if I change schools now, then it means I can make friends ready for next year. But I look back on that doesn't really make sense because,
Yeah.
So, then to me, spin that forward.
Yeah.
How that's something I identified I wanted to be careful with my kids.
Yeah.
So then that's something I wanted to change the experience of.
Right.
So,
and I guess this is where you and I are different a little bit with our upbringings, because I grew up in a home where there was, expression of emotions and thoughts and feelings, and
probably the polar opposite.
probably the polar opposite. And we're a family that we talk, it's not, of course it's not perfect family. There's no perfect family, but I think that's where you and I have clashed a little bit sometimes in our communication, because I come from a family, from my perspective, I don't know if my brothers would agree with it, but where there is talking, and there is a talking of emotions. Well, I certainly know that there was room for emotions growing up, and I can only speak from my experience. I don't know if my brothers, can't speak for them, but I do remember sitting down and talking with Mum about how I was feeling or how she was feeling, or if we had an argument, we always talked it through. And same with me and Dad, if we had an argument, we talked it through. Or I'm always going to arguments, but if there were emotional things, or like if something happened at school, I remember sitting down and talking with Mum about it. Or if there were disagreements with the brothers, I just remember talking about it. So there was a lot of talking.
Yeah. And 100% there was not that level of talking.
Yeah.
From my perspective in our household, because I don't know, it's just different.
Yeah.
And it's not to say one was right or was wrong. It always comes back down to pros and cons.
Yeah.
What it means. So, going with the budget. What are some of the things we're doing to change this for our kids?
Well, I've certainly taken the lead from you in this, because like you're saying, this is a very important thing for you. I probably am realizing now how important it is for you. I was like, okay, cool, we'll do this. But I get it now, sitting here and talking about it, is like we're very open with the kids about finances. But again, like for me, that's not foreign. Like I remember growing up, there were times where money was tight for Mum and Dad, and they were just honest. They would just say, actually, no, we can't get you the wine gums this week, because we really have to stick to the money that's assigned for the groceries, because, and so we knew when money was tight because Mum and Dad talked about it, but they also we never went without anything. And if there was anything we really needed, they would find a way to make that happen. So I think that that's some of the stuff we've embraced with our kids, is that we're really honest with them about things. At the moment, cost of living is impacting everybody, and we can't go and do the luxury things we used to do. Well, it wasn't that often. I say it like we do luxury stuff all the time, but we have had to teach our kids that actually, no, this is our budget at the moment. But then also you work really well at their pocket money with them, and teaching them how to save, and teaching them that if they want to buy like one of those school book club things, they need to use their pocket money. And the kids are even doing loans with you.
Yeah.
Like they borrow from you and they have to pay you back. So it's just, I guess, what you're doing different in our family with the money is that it is an open conversation, and the kids are hearing us talk about the money. We're not keeping anything hidden. If they wanted to come and sit down and look at the budget with us, because I know every child wants to do that.
Yeah.
Like we would sit down and show them the budget.
Well, that's something we have done with Lucy, because she has wanted to see it. And
okay.
I thought you were part of it. I was like, maybe not.
No.
I've sat down with her one night when I was paying a lot of the bills, because we're been talking about money, and this for me, it is important because it's teaching them how to deal with money, something that I don't feel I got. And so going back to what we're trying to talk about, this is something I'll try and change. So I sat down with her, talked about the budget, talked about the bills, what we had to pay, what we didn't have to pay, what we had left over, and broke it all down for her, because to me, if I'm doing this and I do it regularly with her, and then with all the kids, they're going to learn about responsibility of money.
Yeah.
And then lately, the other thing I've been doing is actually when we're going through the supermarket and they're like, "Oh, can we get this bread?" I'm like, well, we could, but that costs $3.25, whereas this one costs $1.95. So, depending on our choice here, affects things later on.
Yeah. I think that's something that we try not to say in our family. Like when we first got together, we were always like, right, we're not going to have a poverty mindset, which meaning we're not just going to see ourselves as poor and not being able to afford things, but we're actually going to just, count our blessings. We've got more than enough. We might not have enough to buy all the treats and things that we usually like, but we still get the basics met. We get the bills paid. We've got a place to sleep. We've got clothes on. We've got a car. So we wanted to make sure that we had an attitude that reflected joy and gratefulness, rather than we don't have anything or we don't have enough. And I think that's what we try to teach our kids, is actually we've got all of these things. And
yeah. And you probably hear me often use the language, we can make that work.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. We don't really say we can't afford it, or no, we can't afford it, or no. If it is legit, we can't afford it. It's just we explain why to the kids, rather than just being like, no, we can't afford it. It's more like, oh, actually this week it's not in the budget. This is what we're paying for this week. If this is something that you're interested in, then maybe we can save up for it, and teaching the kids that way.
And it's that, like, we can make it work, but this is a consequence. So this is what we can't get if we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And so that way they learn.
Yeah, that's right. If you want to go to the pools, then we won't be able to get the book from the Scholastic magazine. And make your choice. What is it that you would be more happy with? And
yeah. No, it's good. So is there something that you recognise from your childhood? Oh,
that's a good question. I think we'll put a song on while I ponder this, because I thought I could get away with just talking about you.
No, not quite.
All right. I'm going to put on Eyes on You by Nikki Yor.
She knew to California, she know that I adore her. She got me like, ooh, I don't know what to do. Sweet tea like Arizona, one look and I'm a goner. You're looking at me while they're looking at you. Okay. I know she came in for me, I know she'll get in for free. She got them wrapped around her fingers, got them down on their knees. She like a wave on the beach, she like 100 degrees. Yeah, she made me a believer, she like heaven to me. Ooh, baby, is it you, baby? Now this party isn't really my vibe. It's cool, baby, I got you, baby, and I know you're leaving with me tonight. She knew to California, she know that I adore her. She got me like, ooh, I don't know what to do. Sweet tea like Arizona, one look and I'm a goner. You're looking at me while they're looking at you. All eyes on you. Ooh. All eyes on you. Ooh. All eyes on you. She could be a movie star, so sweet she could take my heart. Can't find the words to describe it. Lights flash everywhere she go. Lights out when I get her home. She tell me that I'm her favorite. Ooh, baby, is it you, baby? Now this party isn't really my vibe. It's cool, baby, I got you, baby, and I know you're leaving with me tonight. She knew to California, she know that I adore her. She got me like, ooh, I don't know what to do. Sweet tea like Arizona, one look and I'm a goner. eyes on, all eyes, all eyes, all eyes on you. She knew to California, she know that I adore her. She got me like, ooh, I don't know what to do. Sweet tea like Arizona, one look and I'm a goner. You're looking at me while they're looking at you. All eyes on you. All eyes on you.
Alrighty, and that was Eyes on You by Nikki Yor. Okay, so before we went to the song, Michael was sharing about, because we've been talking about what things that we would change
For our kids.
Based off our experiences and our upbringing. And what Michael was talking about is protecting kids from things. And his example was how he felt that his parents were trying to protect him and his siblings around the area of finances or when things were a struggle, and just the impact that had for him and how we are doing things different in our home. I mean, I think that topic of protection is, it's certainly an interesting one, and maybe that's one that we could mark as let's come back to and do a whole session on protecting our children, because I've got more thoughts on that topic. But anyway, he wants me to share something from my upbringing that I do differently now, and the one that comes to mind, it is always a little bit hard having these conversations, and especially when it's attached to your own whānau, because you don't want to cause offence at all. So if any of my family are listening,
Prepare to be offended.
hear it for what it is. No, it's nothing I haven't already said. So when we were growing up, the Harveys have an interesting humour. I don't know how you would describe it. It's a Harvey humour, and
Can be a bit dark at times. Inappropriate.
It's hilarious. I love it. But one aspect, I don't even know if this is part of the humour, is that there would be a bit of mocking and a bit of teasing. And I really struggled with that growing up, was being mocked. And I found it hard because I knew that my family loved me, and I knew that my brothers loved me, and I knew that my dad loved me. But I really struggled with the mocking because it made me feel less than. It made me feel like I wasn't good enough. And it was something that I ended up talking about just briefly. You know, when I say talking, it wasn't a sit down hour-long conversation with brothers and dad. Just at different times brought it up and just shared how it made me feel. And I would say that our family don't really mock.
You mean our immediate family?
The Harveys. Like, we don't,
right.
My family.
There's definitely times.
There's like a teasing.
Yeah, there's times where it might come out a bit more.
Yeah.
But it's not something that is as evident.
Yeah.
As you probably
From
experience.
And of course, I was a child as well, and I think children can be a bit more sensitive to those things. So it could be that it's not really changed much. It's just that I'm an adult now and I don't really care so much. I mean, and what I say about mocking, I put myself in that ring because I know that I've been party to it, mocking. And it's not, so it's not me sitting here going, oh, poor me, I was mocked all my life and I feel so sad. It's not that at all, because I have done my fair share of mocking. And to be honest, after I've done it, I've felt sad. I'm like, oh, actually, that was probably a little bit rough. And I think that's why sometimes it's kind of good to just leave it within family, because family know each other. But I will say that, I do think that our family can still have that mocking humour, but it's just different. I think it's different now. I think because I'm different now, I'm maybe not so sensitive, but definitely as a child, I really struggled. And then that's not any fault. Like, I don't sit here blaming anyone or saying that my brothers were horrible, my dad was horrible, my mum, or that's not at all what I'm saying. It's just I, at that age, didn't cope with it. And I think I'm really mindful of it with having children, because some of our children are a little bit more sensitive than others and would certainly not cope with the mocking at all.
Because a lot of that comes back down to boundaries around it. so that people aren't left feeling like the words actually they're holding on to the words.
Yeah.
Which as an adult you can regulate a lot better.
You can.
Because there's times and stuff where it is just a bit of humour. Other times where actually it's been quite insensitive.
Whereas as a child, I don't think I had the ability to distinguish between a joke and they were being serious. And I just remember not having a very good self-esteem from it. And again, if my family are listening to this by any chance, I'm not saying it to make anyone feel bad or anything. It's just one thing that happened in our upbringing that I wasn't too fond of. And I'm pretty sure if they were sitting here, they would say, oh, but Abby, when you were like this and bossy as heck, like that was super annoying. And I'd say, yeah, you're 100% correct. Yeah. I mean, that's it, right? Like we should have the ability to reflect back on our families and look at where there are the imperfections and talk about it and not...
Well, learn from it.
Learn from it, eh?
That's a whole thing of what we're trying to touch on today is the fact that we want to try and create those better environments and opportunities because we want to lift each other up, the next generation up on our shoulders so they're not having to face the similar things that we ended up facing so then therefore get better. Yeah.
And to be honest, I am not a fan of mocking at all. And any, like when I hear it and I feel terrible if I've taken part in it and I'll apologize to people if I've mocked and I think that I've crossed a line. It's just whether I realize if I have crossed a line. But and like when I hear people mocking people, I really struggle. I think mocking starts to cross a line of being mean and it starts to tear people down. I think teasing's a little bit different maybe.
Yeah.
Like teasing I find is a little bit gentler. Like it's, normally both people are kind of laughing about it too. Like,
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're going to be structured about it, because teasing and mocking are very, very similar. It can be the same thing.
Right.
Often teasing is done in good faith and there is...
like joking around, like joking around, having a bit of a laugh.
Whereas mocking is often being malicious to try tear this person down.
Yeah.
If you're going to differentiate.
And I think with you saying that, I think that's where, for me growing up, I couldn't tell the difference. And I would say pretty much 99% of the time, my family were joking around, like just having a laugh. But I think for me, with my, immaturity, I couldn't see that they were joking around and I thought they were being serious and mocking me. And so I think that's a really good point that you make there, Michael, that maybe... and maybe what could have helped me growing up was to have talked about it because I didn't talk about it. I didn't say to Mum that this, when they say this about me, it makes me feel this way. Like I just cried, laughed, So it's that I think it. If I think about. Sorry, you can all hear me breathing. If I think about how would I teach differently or how would I do things differently in my home, I think one, understand what true mocking really is and teach what joking is, especially because my children are part of that Harvey humour, especially when we all get together at Christmas time or family events or funerals or whatever and the humour starts to come out. I think maybe it's not coming into that arena of protecting them and there being no mocking and no teasing, but actually, teaching them what is actually mocking, because I think you made a really good point there. Like I say that it was mocking growing up, but when you say that mocking is like malicious, trying to tear people down, my family, it was mom, dad and brothers, but they certainly were not doing that. They were not trying to tear me down.
Yeah. I think that, and I think you make some good points. I think that the other aspect to think about with that is also taking responsibility, because that if you're going to be the one who's going to join in, that it's not necessarily if someone gets sensitive about it. It's not, it's their fault for being too sensitive. No, you've crossed a line because you haven't read that person, and so take responsibility and make sure you make it right with that person as well. To teach the kids. Yeah, I
find it really hard to teach the kids to take a joke. Some of them, there's one in particular, finds it very hard to take a joke. And I think it's just probably maybe similar aspect to me, because it would be really interesting to have this conversation with my brothers, and it's almost like I can hear them saying to me, like, just relax, it's a joke, we love you, just relax, it's a joke, lighten up. And that's kind of a little bit of what I feel towards the particular child we're thinking about is, just relax, it's okay, we're just having a joke, it's fine. But then at the same time, their feelings are their feelings are their feelings. How they feel is important and they need to be validated. So it's trying to find that balance of validating their feelings and saying, okay, that's cool. If you don't like being joked around with like that, that's all good. We can talk about that as a family and be mindful of it. But then at the same time, learning to be able to take a joke.
Yeah.
And not creating super, super oversensitive children.
Yeah. It's a murky water of boundaries.
It's a murky water.
Figuring out, because the personalities do matter.
Yes.
Some personalities don't care about it as much. Some do. And those personalities that don't care about it much, they'll be sensitive to other aspects that you've got to be aware of to help build them on. And I think that's the whole breaking down, understanding how your children works to then know where they need strengthening.
And I think that's quite a good point you make there, because I know I have a much more serious personality. I am a bit more half as glass empty than full. I've kidded myself. I've joked. I've kidded myself.
Humoured yourself. Humorous.
I've humoured myself by trying to think that I'm a glass.
You're an optimist.
Yeah.
Should we just go optimist and pessimist? That might be a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's a bit easier. I tried to pretend that I was an optimist, but I think I'm finally accepting. It's because I heard someone talk about it the other day, and they're like, do you know what? I'm a glass is half empty kind of girl, and that's just who I am. But I've got these other people in my life that are the complete opposite that kind of balance me out a little bit. And I just thought, actually, that's really true. And so I can see how things like teasing or joking around have made me feel offended or upset, because I tend to see the negative in life more than the positive in life.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm a complete optimist. We could be 7-0 down in this football game and I still believe we can win.
Yeah, that's right. And so I think what I can take from my childhood and my experience is just, I think talking it through with you is, it's not that, my parents or anyone necessarily needed to do anything different, but I think what I would do is try to help my kids to understand who they are and how to express what's important to them, what they like, what they don't like, and for them to be secure and confident in that, because I think that would probably be a difference there.
Yeah. And I think that's good, because it's showing that, there can be some big things in your childhood that you want to change, but often it's not big things. It's just little aspects of... And it is how you perceive them, and what would you do differently, and how would you teach it differently. And it's not necessarily about changing a whole lot, but it's also teaching resilience or understanding.
Yeah, I think with this topic of things from your childhood, I don't think you need to go delving back and looking at, right, what was my childhood like and what do I want to change? And, sometimes there's no point doing that. But I think the best thing that Michael and I have found is that things pop up. Like today I was reaching for something because Michael wanted me to have an example from my upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I wanted to be selective on that. And so I was reaching for something that, I was comfortable sharing to whoever is listening, because I'm also private and...
Private on a radio show.
I know. I was going to say, no, I'm not private. I share so much on this show. I guess when it comes to my other family, because I'm respectful of their worlds. But anyway, moving on, getting distracted. But I think it's just be mindful when things pop up when you're parenting, and yeah.
Definitely, and I guess because I was trying to round it off with some of the other aspects, the biggest thing I want to tie back to recognising when we're talking about schools at the start of this, I believe there's some aspects in our life that we might try to change, even though society or our environment has changed already, that we actually don't need to, and just be aware of it, but be aware that it's not necessarily a big focus that we have to do. And so it comes back to a question of why are you wanting to make this change? How is it going to impact your children? How are you actually going to measure the impact? Because, and that's something that's quite big, because often we're like, oh, I'm going to do this change, but then you have no idea how successful it is, because you're like, I don't know the start point, I've never recorded that, I don't know the end point.
Yeah. And you only know what you know. And I think if you're listening to this and you're thinking, yeah, there's some things I've been wanting to change, and go find a parenting course. That's what I did. I had some, mine wasn't necessarily childhood related, but I had some behaviours I wanted to change, and so went and did parenting courses and had my whole world kind of just changed from that. So, you can go to parenting courses, you can get counselling, you can talk to people who have gone through the process or got children that are a bit older. Like, there's so many ways that you can try and figure this out, and it's not complicated. You just have to be open and teachable and willing to make a few changes, and then for you and your partner to be on the same wavelength about it.
Yeah. I think the other aspect is just a little bit of trial and error.
Yeah.
That give yourself a month of, I'm going to try this and see how it changes. And actually, I don't like that change, or I do, and work through it. I mean, as we've discovered, there's no right or wrong way to parent.
Yes, my way is right and yours is wrong.
Sure. I mean, there are some things that you shouldn't do. But we're going back.
Yeah. Well, I think this has been an awesome topic, and maybe we could ponder. I mean, I feel like we could keep talking about this. Maybe we could follow on next week with a little bit more thought. We'll just see how we feel. Come back to it in a few months, whatever. But anyway, thank you for listening to us. We really appreciate it. And just do some gentle self-reflection. And if there's anything you want to change, need to change, then do something about it. But thank you for your time. It was lovely to talk with you. Thank you, Michael.
No worries. Thank you for being here as well. It's great to see you.
You're welcome. Anytime. Okay. All right. We will see you next week. Ka kite.